The flames were already clawing through the roof when Zachary Cole spotted the smoke rising from the valley below, black and angry against the evening sky of 1882, Utah Territory. He kicked his horse into a gallop, racing down the rocky slope toward what remained of the isolated cabin, his heart hammering in his chest as the acrid smell of burning wood filled his lungs. Most men would have assumed anyone inside was already dead, but Zachary had seen too much death in his 26 years to give up without checking. He tied his bay mare to a cottonwood tree a safe distance away and ran toward the inferno, pulling his bandana over his nose and mouth. The heat hit him like a physical blow, and the roar of the fire was deafening. But through the flames, he heard something that made his blood run cold. A woman's weak cough from somewhere inside. Without thinking twice, Zachary kicked in what remained of the door and plunged into hell itself. The smoke was so thick he could barely see his hand in front of his face, and the heat seared his exposed skin. He dropped low where the air was slightly clearer and crawled forward, calling out. Another cough answered him off to his right. He felt his way along the floor, pushing aside burning debris with his gloved hands until his fingers touched fabric and then warm skin. The woman was unconscious, lying in a corner where a portion of the roof had not yet collapsed. Her dress was singed and her face was covered in soot, but she was breathing, just barely. Zachary gathered her into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, and turned back toward where he hoped the door still stood. A beam crashed down behind them, sending up a shower of sparks. He ran hunched over, protecting her body with his own as flames licked at his clothes. They burst through the doorway just as another section of roof gave way with a tremendous crash. He did not stop running until they were well clear of the cabin, and then he collapsed to his knees in the dirt, laying her gently on the ground and gasping for air. His hands shook as he checked her pulse. It was there, thready and weak, but there. Her face was streaked with soot and ash, her dark hair matted with sweat and grime. Burns covered her arms and one side of her neck, angry red welts that would need immediate attention. Her breathing was labored, each inhale producing a horrible rasping sound. Zachary knew he had to get her to safety and treat her injuries quickly, or she would not survive the night. He ran back to his horse and retrieved his canteen, then carefully cleaned the soot from her face and lips. She did not respond when he dribbled water into her mouth, but her throat worked reflexively to swallow. That was something at least. He pulled off his jacket despite the evening chill and wrapped it around her, then lifted her onto his horse. He climbed up behind her, holding her against his chest to keep her from falling, and turned toward Moab. The town was a good hour's ride away, but he had no choice. She needed more help than he could provide out here in the wilderness. The ride felt endless. Zachary kept one arm wrapped securely around the woman while the other held the reins. He talked to her the whole way, even though she could not hear him, telling her to hold on, that she was going to be all right, that he had her. He told her about the stars coming out overhead and the way the red rock cliffs glowed in the last light of day. He told her his name and asked hers, knowing he would get no answer but needing to fill the terrible silence with something other than her labored breathing. By the time they reached the outskirts of Moab, full darkness had fallen. Zachary rode straight to the small house at the edge of town where old Doc Morrison lived and worked. He pounded on the door with his fist while still holding the woman, and when the doctor opened it, lamp in hand, Zachary simply said, "She was in a burning cabin. She is badly hurt." Doc Morrison, who had seen just about everything in his 40 years of frontier medicine, took one look at the unconscious woman and ushered them inside immediately. He cleared his examining table with one sweep of his arm, sending papers and books clattering to the floor, and Zachary laid her down as gently as he could. Under the lamplight, her injuries looked even worse. In addition to the burns, there was a gash on her forehead that he had not noticed before, and her breathing sounded worse than ever. "What happened?" Doc Morrison asked as he began cutting away the charred fabric of her dress to examine her injuries properly. "I do not know," Zachary admitted. "I was riding back to town when I saw smoke, found her unconscious inside the cabin. It was already mostly gone by the time I got her out." The doctor worked in silence for a few moments, his weathered face creased with concentration. "These burns are serious, but not the worst I have seen. The smoke inhalation worries me more. Her lungs took in a lot of bad air. Next few days will tell if she pulls through." Zachary felt his stomach clench. "What can I do, right now?" "Nothing. I need to work. You can wait in the other room if you want or come back in the morning." Doc Morrison looked up from his patient, his sharp eyes studying Zachary's soot-covered face. "You did good getting her out of there, son. Not many men would have gone into a burning building for a stranger." "Could not just leave her," Zachary said simply. He knew he should leave, that there was nothing more he could do here, but his feet would not move. He found himself staring at the woman's face, now clean of soot. Even unconscious and injured, he could see that she was beautiful, with delicate features and full lips. But more than that, there was something about her that tugged at something deep in his chest, a feeling he could not name. "All right then, make yourself useful," Doc Morrison said, not unkindly. "There is a basin by the window. Fill it with water from the pump outside and bring it here. I need to clean these wounds properly." Zachary did as he was told, grateful to have something to occupy his hands. For the next 2 hours, he assisted the doctor, fetching supplies and holding lamps and doing whatever else was needed. Doc Morrison cleaned and dressed the burns with a salve that smelled strongly of herbs, stitched the gash on her forehead, and forced water and medicine down her throat to help with the smoke damage to her lungs. Through it all, the woman remained unconscious, occasionally coughing or moaning softly but never truly waking. Finally, when she was bandaged and cleaned and tucked into the narrow bed in the doctor's back room, Doc Morrison straightened up and rubbed his lower back. "That is all I can do for now. Rest and time will have to do the healing from here. If she makes it through the night, her chances improve considerably. Can I stay?" The words were out of Zachary's mouth before he had fully thought them through. "In case she needs something." Doc Morrison raised an eyebrow but did not comment on the request. "There is a chair in the corner. Help yourself to coffee in the kitchen if you want it. I am going to get a few hours of sleep. Wake me if there is any change." Zachary nodded and pulled the chair close to the bed. In the soft lamplight, he could see the steady rise and fall of the woman's chest beneath the blanket. Her breathing still sounded rough, but perhaps not quite as labored as before. He settled into the chair, which was hard and uncomfortable, and prepared for a long night. The hours passed slowly. Zachary dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Around midnight, the woman began to cough violently, her whole body shaking with the force of it. He was on his feet instantly, supporting her shoulders and helping her sit up slightly so she could breathe easier. She did not wake, but the coughing eventually subsided, and he laid her back down gently. Her forehead felt hot beneath his palm. Fever was setting in. He spent the rest of the night changing the damp cloth on her forehead every time it grew warm, trying to keep the fever from climbing too high. He talked to her again, his voice low and steady in the darkness, telling her stories about his childhood in Missouri, about coming west after the war, about his small ranch outside Moab where he ran cattle with his business partner. He told her things he had not spoken aloud in years, and somehow it felt right, even though she could not hear him. Dawn was breaking when her eyes finally fluttered open. They were a striking green, Zachary noticed, even dulled by pain and confusion. She stared at him for a long moment, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of where she was and who he was. Then she tried to speak, but her voice came out as nothing more than a harsh croak. She winced and touched her throat. "Do not try to talk," Zachary said quickly, leaning forward. "Your throat is damaged from the smoke. Here, drink this." He held a cup of water to her lips, and she drank greedily, though it clearly hurt. When she had had enough, she fell back against the pillow, exhausted by even that small effort. "You are safe," Zachary told her gently. "You were in a fire. A cabin fire. I got you out and brought you to the doctor in Moab. Do you remember what happened?" She stared at him, and he saw tears begin to well in those green eyes. She shook her head slightly, then closed her eyes as pain clearly washed over her. A single tear traced down her cheek. "It is all right," Zachary said, though his heart ached at her obvious distress. "You do not have to remember right now. You just need to rest and heal. Doc Morrison says you are going to be fine, but it will take time." She opened her eyes again and looked at him with such intensity that he felt pinned in place. Then she reached out slowly with her bandaged hand and touched his arm, just barely. It was clearly meant as a thank you, and Zachary felt warmth spread through his chest. "You are welcome," he said softly. "I am Zachary Cole, by the way. Most folks call me Zach." She opened her mouth and made a visible effort to speak. What came out was barely a whisper, rough and painful sounding, but he leaned close and caught it. Kate Porter." "Kate," he repeated, and somehow the name felt right. "It is good to meet you, Kate Porter. I am just sorry it had to be under these circumstances." A ghost of a smile touched her lips, but then her eyes were closing again, exhaustion claiming her. Zachary sat back in his chair, relieved beyond measure that she had woken, that she was going to make it. Kate Porter. Now she was not just the woman from the fire. She was real, with a name and a voice, however damaged. And he found himself wanting very much to know more about her, to understand what had brought her to that cabin and what had caused the fire. Doc Morrison appeared in the doorway, fully dressed and carrying a breakfast tray. "She woke up, I take it?" "Yes, just a few minutes ago." She told me her name and then fell back asleep. Kate Porter. The doctor set the tray down on a side table and checked Kate's pulse and breathing. He lifted one of her eyelids to check her pupils, felt her forehead, and nodded with satisfaction. "Fever is not too bad. That is a good sign. The fact that she woke at all is excellent. I think she is going to pull through, Zach, though the recovery will not be quick or easy." Relief flooded through Zachary so intensely that he had to sit back down. "Thank God. You look like hell yourself," Doc Morrison observed. "Your face is burned, you have soot in places soot should not be, and I would bet money you have not slept properly in that chair. Go home. Get cleaned up. I will watch over her." Zachary wanted to protest, but he knew the doctor was right. He was exhausted and filthy, and he would be no use to anyone in this state. "You will send for me if anything changes." "I will. Now go, before you fall over." Reluctantly, Zachary left the doctor's house and retrieved his horse from where he had tied her. The ride to his ranch took 20 minutes, and by the time he arrived, his business partner Thomas was already up and working, repairing a section of fence near the barn. Thomas looked up in surprise when he saw Zachary's condition. "Good Lord, what happened to you?" "There was a fire. A cabin out in the valley. There was a woman inside. I got her out." Zachary dismounted stiffly, every muscle in his body protesting. Thomas dropped his tools and came closer, his weathered face concerned. "Is she all right, are you?" "She will be, Doc says." "I am fine, just need to wash off half of Utah and get some sleep." Zachary filled Thomas in on the details as he unsaddled his horse and turned her into the corral. Thomas listened quietly, asking only a few questions. "You did a brave thing," Thomas said when Zachary had finished. "A good thing. This Kate Porter, does she have family around here?" "I do not know. She could barely speak. I did not want to press her with questions when she just woke up." Zachary realized he knew almost nothing about Kate, and yet he felt strangely connected to her. Maybe it was just because he had saved her life, but it felt like more than that. "Well, rest up. I can handle things here today. You look dead on your feet." Zachary did not argue. He went into the small house he and Thomas shared, stripped off his smoke-ruined clothes, and washed thoroughly in cold water from the basin. The burns on his hands and face stung, but they were minor compared to what Kate had suffered. He collapsed into his bed and was asleep almost before his head hit the pillow. He slept through most of the day, waking only when the afternoon sun was slanting through his window. For a moment he was disoriented, and then everything came rushing back. Kate, the fire. He needed to check on her. He dressed quickly in clean clothes and headed back into town, ignoring Thomas's suggestion that he eat something first. Doc Morrison met him at the door with a knowing look. "I figured you would be back before nightfall. She has been awake on and off throughout the day. Still not talking much, throat hurts too bad, but she is taking water and a bit of broth. Fever is down. She is doing well, all things considered. Can I see her? She is awake now, actually. Go on in, but do not tire her out. She needs rest more than conversation." Zachary knocked softly on the door frame of the back room before entering. Kate was propped up slightly on pillows, and she turned her head when she heard him. Her face was still pale and drawn with pain, but her eyes were clearer than they had been that morning. When she saw him, something in her expression softened. "How are you feeling?" he asked, pulling the chair close to the bed again. "Better," she whispered, and he could tell even that one word cost her effort. Her voice sounded like gravel scraping over wood. "You do not have to talk," he said quickly. "I just wanted to check on you, make sure you were all right." She nodded slightly, then seemed to struggle with something internal. Finally, she spoke again, slowly and painfully. "Thank you for saving me." "You already thanked me this morning, remember? You do not need to keep doing it." "I do," she insisted, and tears filled her eyes again. "You could have died, for me, a stranger." "Hey, none of that now." Zachary reached out instinctively and took her hand gently, careful of the bandages. "I did what anyone would have done." She shook her head slightly, a tear escaping down her cheek. "Not anyone. You." They sat in silence for a moment, Zachary still holding her hand. He knew he should let go, that it was probably inappropriate, but she was not pulling away, and somehow the contact felt important, grounding. "Do you remember what happened?" he asked after a while. "How the fire started?" Kate's expression changed, becoming haunted. She closed her eyes and was quiet for so long that Zachary thought she was not going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Lamp. Knocked it over. Accident." She opened her eyes and looked at him with such sadness that it made his chest ache. "Everything gone. All of it." "I am sorry," Zachary said, and he meant it. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to have to start over from nothing. "Do you have family nearby? Someone we should contact?" The look that crossed her face told him everything he needed to know even before she shook her head. "No one. Just me." "What about the cabin? Was it yours? Renting?" "Was renting." She closed her eyes again, and he could see the exhaustion settling over her like a blanket. "Do not know what to do now." "You do not have to figure that out today," Zachary said firmly. "First you heal. Everything else can wait. Doc Morrison says you can stay here as long as you need to, and when you are better, well, we will figure something out. You are not alone, Kate." She opened her eyes and looked at him with such gratitude that it made something in his chest tighten. "Why?" she whispered. Why are you being so kind? Zachary had to think about that. Why was he being so invested in this woman he had just met? Why had he spent the night by her bedside? Why did the thought of her struggling alone make him want to fix everything for her? I suppose because everyone needs someone in their corner sometimes, he said finally. And right now, I am in yours. More tears slipped down her cheeks, but she was smiling slightly. She squeezed his hand weakly. Thank you, Zachary. Zach, he said. Please call me Zach. Zach, she repeated, and somehow it sounded right in her damaged voice. He stayed with her for another hour, telling her about Moab, about his ranch, about anything and everything he could think of that might distract her from her pain and loss. She listened, occasionally asking a whispered question or making a soft comment. By the time Doc Morrison shooed him out so Kate could rest, Zachary felt like he knew her a little better, and more importantly, she seemed less alone. Over the following days, Zachary fell into a routine. He would work at the ranch in the mornings, handling the cattle and the countless other tasks that came with running a small operation, and then ride into town in the afternoons to visit Kate. Thomas teased him about it good-naturedly, but Zachary did not care. He looked forward to those visits more than he wanted to admit. Kate grew stronger each day. Her voice slowly returned, still rough but no longer quite so painful. The burns began to heal, though Doc Morrison warned that some would leave scars. The gash on her forehead closed cleanly, leaving a thin red line that would fade with time. By the end of the first week, she was sitting up on her own and managing to eat soft foods. By the end of the second, she was walking around the room, though she tired easily. As her body healed, she began to open up more about her life. She told Zachary that she was 23 years old, originally from Kansas. She had come west 2 years ago after her parents died of fever, hoping to make a fresh start. She had worked as a seamstress in various towns, eventually ending up in Moab 6 months ago. The cabin she had been renting was isolated, but the rent was cheap, and she had liked the solitude. I was making a good living, she told him one afternoon as they sat together in Doc Morrison's small parlor. She was well enough now to be out of bed, and the doctor had given her permission to sit in a regular chair as long as she did not overdo it. I was starting to save money, thinking maybe I could eventually buy my own place, open a proper shop. And then one stupid moment, one careless knock of my elbow, and it was all gone. You will build it back up, Zachary said with certainty. You are strong, Kate. Look at how far you have come in just 2 weeks. Maybe, she said, but she did not sound convinced. But I have nothing, Zach. No money, no tools, no fabric. The few things I owned were all in that cabin. I do not even have a dress to wear except this one the doc's wife lent me. How am I supposed to start over from absolutely nothing? Zachary had been thinking about this very problem. What if you stayed in Moab, set up shop here? I know there are ladies in town who would love to have a proper seamstress nearby. Currently they have to make do or order from Denver, which takes forever. With what money? Kate asked, not unkindly. I would need fabric, needles, thread, scissors, a sewing machine if I could afford one. I would need a place to work and live. That all costs money I do not have. What if someone lent you the money to get started, just until you got on your feet? Kate looked at him sharply. Zach, no, I cannot take your money. You have already done so much. It would be a loan, he insisted. You could pay me back once you are established. I have been doing well with the ranch. I have some money set aside. It is just sitting there. Why not use it to help someone who actually needs it? I do not know. Kate worried her lower lip, and Zachary found himself staring at her mouth before jerking his eyes away. Over the past 2 weeks, he had become increasingly aware of her in ways that had nothing to do with her recovery. He noticed how her eyes lit up when she smiled, how gracefully she moved even when weakened by injury, how kind she was to Doc Morrison and his wife even while clearly struggling with her own problems. He was attracted to her, he could admit that to himself, but more than that, he genuinely liked her, enjoyed her company, looked forward to seeing her every day. At least think about it, he pressed. You do not have to decide right now. Why are you doing this? Kate asked, echoing her question from that first day. Really, Zach, why do you care so much about what happens to me? Zachary met her eyes and decided to be honest. Because I like you, Kate. I like talking to you, spending time with you. And I think you have had some bad luck lately, but that does not mean you do not deserve a chance to make something of yourself. Let me help, please. Color rose in her cheeks, and she looked down at her hands. I like you too, she said quietly. More than I probably should, given that we have only known each other 2 weeks. But Zach, I do not want you to feel obligated to help me just because you pulled me out of that fire. That is not fair to you. I do not feel obligated, he said firmly. I feel privileged that I was there that day, that I got the chance to meet you. Even under terrible circumstances, meeting you has been the best thing that has happened to me in a long time. Kate looked up at him, and the expression in her eyes made his breath catch. You really mean that? Every word. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, and Zachary felt something shift between them, some unspoken acknowledgement passing back and forth. Then Doc Morrison came bustling in with supplies for changing Kate's bandages, and the moment broke. But something had changed, Zachary knew. Something had been said without words, and there was no taking it back now. That night, lying in his bed at the ranch, Zachary stared at the ceiling and admitted to himself what he had been trying to ignore. He was falling for Kate Porter. Maybe he had been since that first moment he had seen her lying unconscious on the floor of that burning cabin. It was crazy, irrational, far too fast. But it was also undeniable. He cared about her deeply, and he wanted her in his life in a way that went far beyond just helping her get back on her feet. The question was, did she feel the same way? 3 weeks after the fire, Doc Morrison declared Kate healed enough to leave his care. The burns had scarred but were no longer at risk of infection. Her lungs were clear. Her voice was almost back to normal, with just a slight rasp that might or might not fade completely. She was ready to start rebuilding her life. Zachary arrived at the doctor's house to find Kate sitting on the porch, looking nervous. He says I can leave today, she told him. But Zach, I have nowhere to go. I have been thinking about what you said about staying in Moab, and I want to try it. But I cannot keep staying with Doc Morrison, and I cannot afford a hotel. I have been thinking about that too, Zachary said, sitting down beside her. There is a small house in town, belongs to a widow named Mrs. Fletcher. She moved to Denver to live with her daughter last month. The house is sitting empty. I talked to her through letters, and she says you can rent it for a very reasonable price. It has a front room that would be perfect for a shop. Kate stared at him. You have been arranging this behind my back. Not behind your back. For you, there is a difference. He smiled tentatively. I wanted to make sure you had options, but if you would rather do something else, that is fine too. I will not be offended. Zach, Kate's voice broke and she covered her face with her hands. You have been so good to me, too good. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not have to repay kindness, Kate. That is not how it works. He reached out hesitantly and touched her shoulder. Will you at least look at the house, see if it suits you? She lowered her hands and her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Yes. Yes, I will look at it. The house was small but charming, with whitewashed walls and a little garden out back that had gone wild without care. The front room was indeed perfect for a shop, with large windows that let in plenty of natural light. There was a tiny kitchen, a bedroom barely big enough for a bed and dresser, and an outhouse in back. To Zachary's eyes it was modest at best, but Kate walked through it with wonder on her face. "It is perfect," she breathed, running her hand along the windowsill in the front room. "I could put my sewing table here and shelves along this wall for fabric, and I could hang finished pieces there for display. Oh, Zach, it is perfect." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Zachary found himself grinning. "So you will take it? If Mrs. Fletcher truly does not mind, then yes." "Yes, I will take it." She turned to him, her face glowing with excitement and hope. "I will make this work, Zach. I promise I will pay back every penny you lend me." "I know you will. I have no doubts about that." Over the next few weeks, Zachary helped Kate set up her shop. He fronted her the money for fabric and supplies, insisting it was a loan she could pay back whenever she was able. He helped her build shelves and a proper work table. He spread the word around town that there was a seamstress in Moab now, and ladies should bring their business to Miss Kate Porter. The customers started trickling in almost immediately. At first, it was just simple mending jobs and basic sewing, but as word spread about the quality of Kate's work, more elaborate projects followed. She made dresses and shirts, quilts and curtains, tailored suits and fancy gowns for special occasions. She worked long hours, determined to make her business succeed, but she always had time for Zachary when he stopped by, which was nearly every day. They fell into an easy companionship that felt as natural as breathing. Zachary would often bring her dinner from the hotel when she was too busy to cook for herself. She would mend his shirts and sew new ones without being asked, refusing payment. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, discussing town gossip, debating politics and religion and philosophy late into the evening. Thomas noticed, of course. One evening when Zachary arrived back at the ranch later than usual, Thomas was waiting up. "You are going to marry that girl," Thomas said without preamble. Zachary felt heat rise in his face. "I do not know what you are talking about." "The hell you do not. You are there every day, Zach. You look at her like she hung the moon, and unless I am mistaken, she looks at you the same way." "So when are you going to do something about it?" "It is complicated," Zachary protested. "She is trying to get her business established. She has been through a trauma. I do not want to push her or make her feel obligated because I helped her." "Has it occurred to you that maybe she wants you to push a little? That maybe she is waiting for you to make a move?" Thomas shook his head. "You are not kids anymore, Zach. You are both old enough to know what you want, and it is pretty damn clear to everyone in town that you two want each other. Stop overthinking it and just tell her how you feel." Zachary knew Thomas was right, but knowing and doing were two different things. What if Kate did not feel the same way? What if she saw him only as a friend, a benefactor? What if he ruined everything by saying too much too soon? But the next evening, when he arrived at Kate's house with dinner from the hotel, the decision was taken out of his hands. Kate opened the door looking flustered and pleased, and she pulled him inside with barely a greeting. "You will not believe it," she said, her eyes shining. "Mrs. Keller, the mayor's wife, just commissioned me to make a gown for the harvest dance next month, and she is paying me double my usual rate because she wants it to be spectacular. Zach, this is huge. If I do a good job, every woman in town will want dresses from me. This could make my business." "That is wonderful, Kate." He set the food down on her small table and pulled her into an impulsive hug. She hugged him back, laughing, and the feel of her in his arms was so right that Zachary did not want to let go. When they finally pulled apart, both of them seemed to realize at the same moment how close they were standing. Kate's smile faded, replaced by something more serious, more intense. She looked up at him, and Zachary saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. "Kate," he said softly, his heart hammering. "I need to tell you something." "I know," she whispered. "I know what you are going to say because I feel it too." "You do?" "I have for weeks now, maybe longer." "I did not want to say anything because you have done so much for me, and I did not want you to think I was just grateful or that I felt obligated. But it is not that, Zach. It is not that at all." "Then what is it?" He reached up and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing over the faint scar on her forehead. "It is that I am falling in love with you," Kate said, and her voice was steady despite the tears shining in her eyes. "I think I started falling that first day when I woke up and you were there, when you had stayed by my side all night even though you did not know me at all. And I have been falling harder every day since. I love you, Zachary Cole." The joy that flooded through Zachary was so intense it was almost painful. "I love you too," he said, and then he kissed her. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing these new waters. But then Kate made a soft sound and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something passionate and claiming. Zachary felt like his heart might burst out of his chest. This was right. This was what he had been waiting for without even knowing it. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Zachary rested his forehead against hers, his hands framing her face. "I want to do this right, Kate. I want to court you properly, the way you deserve. I want to take you to dances and dinners, let everyone know you are mine and I am yours. And someday when you are ready, I want to marry you." "Someday," Kate smiled through her tears. "How about relatively soon?" Zachary laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. "We will see. But first, let me do the courting part. You deserve that." "I do not need grand gestures, Zach. I just need you. You have me," he promised, "for as long as you want me." "Forever, then," Kate said simply and kissed him again. Word spread quickly through Moab that Zachary Cole was courting Kate Porter. And if anyone thought it was strange that he was so devoted to the woman he had saved from a fire, they kept it to themselves. Most folks seemed pleased by the development. They made a handsome couple, people said, and both of them deserved some happiness after the hardships they had endured. True to his word, Zachary courted Kate properly. He took her to the harvest dance, where she wore a beautiful dress she had made herself and danced with him until her feet ached. He brought her flowers from his garden and took her on picnics to the red rock formations outside town. He introduced her to all his friends and made sure everyone knew she was the most important person in his life. Kate bloomed under the attention. Her business continued to grow, and she was soon making enough money to start paying Zachary back for his loan. He tried to tell her there was no hurry, but she insisted. She had her pride, she said, and she wanted to contribute equally to their future together. Their future. It was something they talked about more and more as the months passed. Zachary wanted to expand the ranch, maybe buy some more land and increase his herd. Kate wanted to eventually hire an assistant so she would not have to work quite such long hours. They both wanted a family, children to fill that empty space neither of them had quite acknowledged before. 6 months after the fire, on a clear spring evening in 1883, Zachary took Kate out to a spot on his ranch where the view stretched for miles. All red rock and blue sky and endless possibility. He had been planning this for weeks, and he was so nervous his hands were shaking. "Kate," he said, taking both her hands in his. "The day I pulled you out of that fire, my life changed. I did not know it then, but saving you saved me too. You have brought joy and light and love into my life that I did not even know was missing. You make me want to be a better man, to build a better future. And I want to build that future with you if you will let me." He dropped to one knee, pulling the ring from his pocket. It was a simple gold band with a small diamond, all he could afford, but he had chosen it with care. Kate Porter, will you marry me? Kate was crying, but she was smiling too, and she nodded emphatically. Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you, Zach. He slid the ring onto her finger, and then he was standing and she was in his arms, and they were both laughing and crying at the same time. I love you so much, Zachary said into her hair. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this. I could never regret you, Kate said fiercely. Never, Zach. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. They were married 2 months later in Moab's small church, with half the town in attendance. Kate wore a gown she had sewn herself, ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Zachary wore his best suit, the one Kate had tailored for him, and he thought he might actually pass out from happiness when Kate walked down the aisle toward him. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They exchanged vows in steady voices, promising to love and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed Kate with such tenderness that several of the ladies in attendance openly wept. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and dancing and toasts that went on long into the night. Doc Morrison gave a speech about how he had known from the start that these two were meant for each other. Thomas teased Zachary mercilessly, but also said he had never seen his friend happier. Kate's customers came up one by one to wish her well and tell her how much they admired her strength and skill. But the best moment came at the end of the night, when Zachary and Kate finally left the festivities and rode out to the ranch, which was now their home. Zachary had spent weeks fixing up the house, adding a new room and making everything as nice as he could. He carried Kate over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cole," he said, and the words felt like magic on his tongue. "I like the sound of that," Kate said, smiling up at him. "Mrs. Zachary Cole, Kate Cole. Yes, I like it very much." That night they came together as husband and wife, and it was everything Zachary had hoped for and more. Kate was beautiful and passionate and loving, and he felt like the luckiest man in the world to have found her, to have saved her, to have been saved by her in return. Life settled into a happy rhythm after that. Zachary worked the ranch with Thomas, expanding the operation slowly and steadily. Kate continued running her shop, though she now worked from home several days a week so she could spend more time with Zachary. They built a life together, full of small joys and everyday moments that somehow felt extraordinary simply because they were sharing them. A year after their wedding, Kate told Zachary she was pregnant. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. They spent the next months preparing for the baby, Zachary building a cradle with his own hands while Kate sewed tiny gowns and blankets. They argued good-naturedly about names and debated whether they wanted a boy or a girl, though truthfully they did not care as long as the baby was healthy. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1884, squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect. They named him Henry Thomas Cole, after Zachary's father and his business partner. Zachary held his son for the first time and felt something crack open in his chest, a love so fierce and protective it almost scared him. This was his family, his wife and his son. Everything he had ever wanted, everything he had never dared to dream of having. Kate was a natural mother, patient and loving even when exhausted. Zachary did his best to help, walking the floor with Henry when he cried in the night, changing diapers and learning how to warm bottles. They were both learning as they went, making mistakes and laughing about them, supporting each other through the hard days and celebrating the good ones. As Henry grew from an infant into a toddler and then a little boy, Zachary and Kate's love for each other only deepened. They had weathered storms together, literal and figurative, and come through stronger for it. They had built a life from ashes, created a family from loneliness. Every morning when Zachary woke up next to Kate, he said a silent prayer of thanks for the day he had seen smoke rising from that valley, for the decision to ride down and investigate, for the courage to run into a burning building. When Henry was 3 years old, Kate became pregnant again. This time they had a daughter, whom they named Clara Rose. She had Kate's green eyes and Zachary's dark hair, and she was as sweet-tempered as her brother was rambunctious. Henry adored his baby sister, bringing her toys and singing to her in his childish voice. Zachary would watch his family together and feel so full of love he thought he might burst. The ranch prospered. Zachary and Thomas bought more land and expanded their herd significantly. They hired additional hands to help with the work, and the small operation became a respectable business. Kate's sewing shop remained successful, though she had indeed hired an assistant, a young woman named Mary who was learning the trade. This gave Kate more time to spend with the children, which was exactly what she wanted. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Kate back to the spot where he had proposed. They left the children with Thomas for the evening and rode out to watch the sunset over the red rocks. They stood together in comfortable silence, Zachary's arms around Kate's waist, her head resting on his shoulder. "You remember the first time you brought me out here?" Kate asked. "I was so nervous I could barely breathe." "I was terrified," Zachary admitted. "I was so afraid you would say no." "I could never have said no to you. Not then, not now, not ever." Kate turned in his arms so she could look at him. "You gave me everything, Zach. My life, my home, my family. I was lost when you found me in every way that matters, and you did not just save me that day. You kept saving me every day since." "You saved me too," Zachary said, cupping her face the way he had that first night they confessed their love. "I did not know how empty my life was until you filled it. You and the children, you are everything to me. Everything." They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and red, and Zachary felt the same rightness he had felt from the beginning. This was where he was meant to be. This was who he was meant to be with. Everything that had happened, all the pain and loss and struggle, had led him to this moment, to this woman, to this life. The years continued to pass, marked by the milestones of their growing family. Henry started school and proved to be a bright, curious student. Clara was quieter but equally intelligent, with a love of books and stories. When Clara was 4, Kate gave birth to twin boys, Matthew and Marcus, who kept everyone on their toes with their boundless energy and mischievous natures. The house that had once seemed adequately sized suddenly felt cramped, so Zachary built an addition, creating more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Through it all, Zachary and Kate's love remained the foundation of everything. They still made time for each other, stealing moments alone whenever possible. They still talked for hours, sharing their thoughts and dreams and fears. They still looked at each other with the same wonder and passion they had felt at the beginning, though now it was tempered with the deep security of knowing they would never leave each other. On the 10th anniversary of the fire that had brought them together, Zachary and Kate took a trip out to the valley where the cabin had stood. There was nothing left of the structure now. Time and weather had erased even the foundation. But standing there, looking at the spot where his life had changed forever, Zachary felt a wave of emotion wash over him. "I could have lost you," he said quietly. "If I had ridden a different route that day, if I had been just 10 minutes later, you would have died in that fire. And I never would have known what I was missing." Kate took his hand and squeezed it. "But you did not ride a different route. You were exactly where you were supposed to be, exactly when you were supposed to be there. I believe that, Zach. I believe we were always meant to find each other one way or another." "I believe that too," Zachary said, and he meant it. Looking back over the past decade, he could see the hand of Providence in so many moments. The lucky timing, the split-second decisions, the small miracles that had added up to this life they had built together. They stood together in the empty valley, holding hands, and Zachary thought about all the lives that had been touched by what happened here. Doc Morrison, who had saved Kate's life with his skill. Thomas, who had supported Zachary through everything and become like an uncle to the children. Mrs. Fletcher, whose house had given Kate a fresh start. All the people in Moab who had welcomed Kate into the community and helped her build her business. The children they had brought into the world, who would grow up to have their own stories, their own impacts. One moment, one act of courage, and all these ripples spreading outward. It was humbling and profound and beautiful. "Let us go home," Kate said softly. "The children will be wondering where we are." Home. The word had never sounded sweeter. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set behind them, painting the world in shades of amber and gold. The house came into view, lights glowing warmly in the windows, and Zachary could see small figures moving inside. His children. His family. Henry was 11 now, already showing signs of the man he would become. He had Zachary's work ethic and Kate's kindness, and he was devoted to his younger siblings. Clara was 8, gentle and creative, spending hours drawing and writing stories. The twins were 4 and absolute tornadoes, but sweet-natured beneath the chaos. There was talk of Kate possibly being pregnant again, though nothing was certain yet. As they approached the house, the front door flew open and the twins came running out, shouting for them. Henry and Clara followed at a more sedate pace, smiling. Thomas appeared in the doorway, shaking his head with exaggerated exasperation. "Your children are animals," he called out. "I have been chasing them for the past hour." "They are your niece and nephews," Kate called back, laughing. "That makes them your problem too." They dismounted, and the twins immediately attached themselves to Zachary's legs, both talking at once about something they had done while he was gone. Clara came to Kate and hugged her waist. Henry took the horses' reins without being asked, leading them to the barn to unsaddle and care for them. This was family, Zachary thought. This messy, chaotic, beautiful thing they had created together. That night, after the children were finally in bed and the house was quiet, Zachary and Kate sat together on their porch, watching the stars come out. They did not talk much. They did not need to. After 10 years together, they could communicate as much with silence as with words. "I love you," Kate said eventually, her head resting on Zachary's shoulder. "I love you too," Zachary replied, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Always have, always will." "Always," Kate agreed, and in that single word was a promise, a vow renewed. Through fire and fear and uncertainty, they had found each other. They had built a life, raised a family, created a legacy, and they would continue to do so together for all the years they had left. The scar on Kate's forehead had faded to almost nothing over the years, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. But Zachary still saw it every time he looked at her, and he was grateful for it. Grateful because it was a reminder of what they had survived, what they had overcome. A reminder that even from the worst moments can come the greatest blessings. He had carried her out of that fire half dead, and in doing so, he had found the other half of his own soul. She had been lost, and he had found her. But really, they had found each other, two broken people who became whole together. As the years continued to roll on, Zachary and Kate grew old together with grace and gratitude. They watched their children grow into adults, marry, and have children of their own. Henry took over the ranch when Zachary was ready to step back, running it with the same dedication his father had shown. Clara became a teacher, shaping young minds in Moab's growing school. The twins went into business together, opening a general store that quickly became the heart of the community. Kate eventually closed her sewing shop, her hands too stiff with age to do the fine work anymore. But she still made clothes for her grandchildren and taught her granddaughters the skills she had spent a lifetime perfecting. Zachary slowed down as well, content to spend his days working in the garden and playing with the grandchildren who seemed to multiply every year. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary surrounded by family and friends, a huge gathering at the ranch that lasted all day. Someone gave a toast about how Zachary and Kate were an inspiration, a testament to the power of love and commitment. Zachary looked around at all the faces, at the life they had created, and felt a profound sense of peace and accomplishment. That night, lying in bed beside Kate, he took her hand and held it gently. Her fingers were thin and marked with age now, but to him they were still beautiful. Everything about her was beautiful. No regrets, he asked softly. Not a single one, Kate replied without hesitation. You, not one. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Saving me was the best decision you ever made, Kate corrected with a smile in her voice. Marrying me was just the logical next step, Zachary chuckled. Fair enough. Saving you then, best decision ever. They fell silent, and Zachary listened to Kate's breathing slowly even out as she drifted towards sleep. He stayed awake a little longer, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. If he had not ridden down that valley, if he had not been brave enough to run into the flames. If Kate had not survived, so many small chances, so many moments where everything could have gone differently, but it had not gone differently. It had gone exactly as it was meant to, and here they were, 50 years old and still in love, still grateful, still together. Thank you, Zachary whispered into the darkness, though he was not entirely sure who he was thanking. God, fate, chance, Kate herself, maybe all of them. Thank you for this life. Beside him, Kate stirred and squeezed his hand as if even in sleep she understood what he was saying. Zachary closed his eyes and let himself drift off, surrounded by warmth and love and the absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged. The years turned into decades. Zachary and Kate celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 40th. They became great-grandparents, a whole new generation carrying their legacy forward. The ranch continued to prosper under Henry's care, expanded and modernized but still keeping the heart of what Zachary had built. The town of Moab grew around them, changing with the times but maintaining the close-knit community feel that had welcomed Kate all those years ago. Through it all, Zachary and Kate remained partners in every sense of the word. They supported each other through the losses that came with age. The death of Thomas, who had been like a brother to Zachary, the passing of old friends, the inevitable aches and pains of bodies that had worked hard for decades. But they also celebrated the joys, weddings and births, accomplishments and milestones, quiet moments of contentment. On a warm summer evening in their 67th year, just past their 45th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Kate sat together on their porch as they had done countless times before. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age but still sharp of mind and devoted to each other. Their children and grandchildren had visited earlier, filling the house with noise and laughter, but now it was just the two of them, watching the sun set over the red rocks they both loved. You remember what you said to me, the first time I woke up after the fire? Kate asked, her voice still carrying that slight rasp that had never quite gone away. I said a lot of things. Which part? You said I was safe, that I was going to be fine, and you were right. Kate turned to look at him, and even with the lines of age on her face, Zachary could still see the beautiful woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. You made me safe, Zach. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. and I have been fine, better than fine, every day since." "You did the same for me," Zachary said, taking her hand. "I was just going through the motions before I met you, working the ranch, existing, but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly live, Kate. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to wake up every morning with a smile." "We did well, did we not?" Kate said softly. "Look at what we built together. All those children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The business, the ranch, the life we created. We did well." "We did better than well," Zachary agreed. "We did extraordinary." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, holding hands, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. Somewhere in the distance, Zachary could hear one of his great-grandchildren laughing. The sound made him smile. This was legacy. This was love. This was everything. "Zach," Kate said after a while. "Yes, my love. If you had to do it all over again, if you could go back to that day when you saw the smoke, would you still ride down, still run into that fire?" Zachary did not even have to think about it. "Every single time," he said firmly. "I would find you every single time, Kate. In every life, in every version of our story, I would always choose to save you, because saving you saved me too." Kate smiled, and a tear traced down her weathered cheek. "I love you, Zachary Cole, more than I could ever put into words. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am so grateful that I got to spend my life with you. And I love you, Kate Cole. You are my heart, my home, my everything, now and always." They kissed then, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 45 years of love and commitment and partnership. And sitting there on their porch, surrounded by the land they loved and the legacy they had built, Zachary felt complete. His life had been good, full of purpose and meaning and love. And it had all started with one moment of courage, one decision to ride toward the smoke instead of away from it. He had found Kate in a burning cabin, half dead and alone. He had carried her out and nursed her back to health. And in doing so, he had found his own salvation, his own purpose, his own greatest love. They had built a life together from those ashes, something beautiful and enduring and true. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Zachary and Kate sat together in peace. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and held on tight through everything life threw at them. Their story had begun in fire and fear, but it had become one of love and hope and unshakable commitment. And when, many years later, they passed from this world into the next within months of each other, they left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. A legacy not just of children and grandchildren, but of love itself. A testament to what two people can build together when they choose each other, every day, through every challenge and every joy. The ranch still stands, run now by great-great-grandchildren who know the story of how it all began. In town, there is a plaque on the building that was once Kate's sewing shop, commemorating the woman who came to Moab with nothing and built a life through skill and determination and the love of a good man. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, people swear they can see two figures sitting on the porch of the old Cole Ranch house, holding hands and watching the sunset, still together even in memory. Their love story became legend in Moab, passed down through the generations as an example of what true love looks like. Not the easy, surface kind of love, but the deep, enduring kind that survives fire and hardship, and the simple wearing away of time. The kind of love that saves and is saved in return, that builds and nurtures and creates something greater than the sum of its parts. Zachary Cole had ridden toward smoke when most men would have ridden away. He had run into a burning building when every instinct said to stay safe. He had carried Kate Porter out of that inferno and into a new life, one neither of them could have imagined. And in doing so, He had written a love story for the ages, one that proved that sometimes the greatest loves are born from the most desperate circumstances, and that courage and compassion can change not just one life, but generations of lives to come. That is the story of Zachary and Kate Cole, the cowboy and the seamstress, the rescuer and the rescued. Two halves of one whole who found each other in the most unlikely of ways and chose each other every day for the rest of their lives. It is a story of the Wild West, of courage and survival, but most of all, it is a story of love in its purest, most powerful form. And that story, like all the best love stories, lives on long after its main characters have taken their final bow, inspiring others to be brave, to be kind, and to always, always ride toward the smoke when someone needs saving. Because you never know when saving someone else might just save you too.